that whenever he first left, he probably thought that it was gonna be easy and like he was gonna go through there quickly. But then whenever they got there, they tried walking there because they had lost their ship. So I mean, it was gonna be like a long walk for them to get there. And then so the trip was difficult. And then, but they still continued to go on. And then in the text, it like said that the trip was harrowing. And then they faced hunger in the treacherous sea. And then they were walking because they lost contact with their ships. And then the author states that it made us risk going in this manner and placing ourselves in a sea so treacherous and without any one of us who went having any knowledge of the art of navigation. So that quote was kind of like talking mainly about the sea, but then it was like they went out there thinking that they could do this when like none of them really know how to navigate through any type of land.
I was thinking of the answer that. So,
Can you speak up, Gabby? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Whenever you're ready.
this woman found like a tree on this turtle that was in the middle of the ocean, and I feel like she didn't know what to do. So like the animals like in the sea started helping her with the roots and all that for the woman, and then my evidence is they grew a great tree, which was not like any of these trees that we knew. Like I feel like they never saw like what a real tree was, and that's how they came.
The author introduced the challenges in Balboa and like him being a stranger by him like literally going to a new world that wasn't explored yet. And so each step that he took on that new land was something like unusual and unique to him because it was like across the whole ocean. He had never seen anything like it. And so on page 24 it says Balboa wonders if it's the same sun that shines in Spain. And so I use that evidence because I said that it made Balboa question everything around him, even things that he had seen his whole life like the sun. And so it like really just demonstrated how like just how different that land was around him and how he was like truly a stranger.
Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is let's talk about who both wrote about, or who all wrote about World on the Turtle's Back. Just Gabby? Okay. And the Desperate Trek Across America? Okay, both of you? Okay, so I want to hear from Katie and Louise, how did let's talk about your reasons. Katie, what is your first reason to support your claim?
So my first reason to support my claim was when Cabeza and his men arrived in the unfamiliar land, the Native Americans kidnapped the men and forced them to learn life in the native style. And I talked about how the explorers were completely unfamiliar with the native way of life, so they had to entirely rethink how to live. And I said the Spaniards believed that they could just come in and take over, but the natives quickly proved them wrong. As strangers in a strange land, the explorers learned through initial misunderstanding that they must adapt to new surroundings with an open mind.
Okay, so one of my reasons was like about the Indians because I feel like that was like a main part because not only were they strangers to the land, they were strangers like the people who had been there.
Okay.
And then I was talking about like the trip and how they didn't have like know how to navigate through there, so that also made it difficult for like them to get around.
Okay.
And then and then like mentally because like they had to like mentally say that like they knew they were still Europeans, but if they weren't able to like adapt to the Indian ways, they wouldn't have been able to survive.
Yeah. Katie, how does that, did you talk about in your essay their difficulty to navigate the land?
No, so I think that's something really cool that we had the same story, but you took like a different aspect through it. And you took the way talking about the navigation when I just talked about how when they got there it was difficult. And through the Indians and through, I focused more on the unfamiliarity with the culture more than I did the land.
Okay, so I feel like that she was like more with the culture, like she said, and that how like they had to adapt to like before, like while they're strangers, they had to like find a way to adapt or they wouldn't be able to survive. But mine was like more about like them taking the trip and how it was difficult before them being able to like adapt.
Yeah, those are both interesting perspectives. Gabby, what was one of your reasons for your evidence? For your claim?
One of my reasons was how there were like no type of humans
Mhm.
or on the turtle, but then like she found the turtle and then how the woman like went on there. And another one is how like towards the middle of like the story, the twins was like they wasn't like let me see, like good with each other at first, and
Mhm.
like how the right hand twin didn't want the left hand twin to kill the mother, and the left hand twin didn't want to go out where they were supposed to.
That's good. Cooper?
So I used the same style as Louise in my writing, and I talked about like how he got there, the people and the culture that like he was a stranger to all of that surrounded him. And so the first reason I used like related to the people of like the New World, and I said that he was very different from the others that surrounded him, and he was a stranger to the Native Americans. And so I like used evidence, and I talked about how even like the way that he was talking was like new to the people of the land, the Native Americans, and like everything was different with like the way that they talked and the way that they like even understood humor.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Go ahead.
So I think it's really cool how we use different texts, and you talked about like the different languages. In A Desperate Trek Across America, when the Cabeza and his men were with the Indians, they taught them how to speak their native language. And once the European men went back home, they took that language with them and they taught it to the rest of their men. And I think it's really cool how both of our stories started like as strangers in this unfamiliar place that didn't understand like the languages, but it was something they could learn and like take back home with them.
Okay, so now I'm just gonna ask some questions and anybody can answer. Or I'll just ask somebody. Katie, can you elaborate on how that exam?
Okay. Okay.
Katie, what text evidence supports your reason?
So I'm gonna use my last reason, and my last reason is after everything that happened to the explorers, they went back to Europe. Once back, the explorers ran into unrecognizable men, possibly Native Americans. Cabeza de Vaca then confronted the unrecognizable men speaking their language. Before Cabeza's experience with the natives, he would have never confronted them in a nice way. He would have treated them as enemies and tried to kill them. But because of his experiences with the Indians in a strange place, he understood what it was like to be in an unknown land. The text states, "No longer did the castaways view their companions as mere chattel," and that was on page 40.
Cooper, can you give a quote from the text that supports your idea?
So one of my other reasons I used was that Balboa was unfamiliar with the culture that surrounded him. And so the evidence I used to support that was Balboa is loved by no one and feared by all. The Indians think of him as a god. They make no distinction between